The morning light of three suns cast strange shadows across the massive training ground of the Galactic Military Academy. Park Ji-woo stood at the edge of the field, watching hundreds of alien cadets practice their combat skills. She was small compared to most of them, barely reaching the chest height of the average Altarian warrior. Her black hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her standard academy uniform looked loose on her thin frame. Around her towered beings that seemed designed for war, the blue-skinned Altarians had thick crystalline plates growing from their arms and shoulders that could deflect energy blasts. Their eyes glowed with an inner light that let them see in complete darkness. The mechanical Nexus warriors were even more impressive, with forearms that could move independently and built-in weapons systems that hummed with deadly power. Some had replaced parts of their bodies with advanced cybernetics that made them faster and stronger than any organic being. Then there were the others. The rock-like granite people who could survive in space without protection. The insect-like hive minds who could communicate instantly across vast distances. The energy beings from the void who could phase through solid matter. Each species brought natural advantages that had made them powerful in their home systems. But Ji-woo was just human. She had two arms like most species, but they were not particularly strong. She had no natural armor, no built-in weapons, no special powers that made her stand out. The only thing unusual about her was that she was here at all. Humans were still new to galactic society, and most other species saw them as weak and primitive. The mockery started early in her training. Kaze, the Altarian prince who stood nearly 8 feet tall, would often point at her during combat exercises. His voice carried across the training ground when he spoke to his friends about the little human girl who thought she could fight alongside real warriors. His crystalline armor caught the light as he demonstrated energy projection techniques that could melt steel. The other cadets joined in the teasing. Tech and Zin, the Nexus twins, would spin their forearms in complex patterns while making jokes about humans only having two. The granite warriors would flex their stone-like muscles and ask if humans were made of the same soft flesh as the small animals on their homeworld. Even some of the instructors seemed to doubt that a human belonged in advanced combat training. During weapons practice, Ji-woo struggled with the standard galactic firearms. They were designed for beings with greater strength and different hand shapes. The energy rifles felt heavy in her grip, and the targeting systems were calibrated for alien eye structures. She had to adjust everything to work with human limitations, while others used their equipment without any modifications. The physical training was even harder. The obstacle courses were built for species that could jump 3 times higher than humans or climb walls with natural claws. Ji-woo had to find different paths through the challenges, often taking longer routes that other cadets could complete in half the time. Her small size meant she could fit through spaces others could not reach, but this was seen as cheating rather than cleverness. In hand-to-hand combat practice, she was paired with opponents who outweighed her by hundreds of pounds. Altarian cadets could project energy shields during sparring matches, while Nexus warriors could grab her with 2 arms while striking with the other 2. The first few weeks left her covered in bruises and barely able to keep up with the basic requirements. But something interesting happened during those difficult early months. While other cadets relied on their natural advantages, Ji-woo began to study everything around her. She watched how each species moved in combat, noting their preferred attack patterns and defensive positions. She saw that Altarians always charged their energy attacks for exactly 2 seconds before firing, giving opponents time to dodge if they knew what to look for. She noticed that Nexus warriors had trouble coordinating all 4 arms when they were tired. Their mechanical parts required regular maintenance, and they moved more slowly in the hour after their daily system updates. The granite people were incredibly strong and tough, but they turned slowly and had blind spots behind their rocky shoulders. During equipment training, while others focused on mastering their assigned weapons, Ji Woo spent extra time learning about every system in the academy. She studied the technical manuals for devices other species considered too primitive or simple. The human sections of the library became her second home as she researched military history and tactical theory. Her fellow cadets saw this as more evidence of human weakness. They assumed she needed extra study time because she was too stupid to understand the advanced concepts naturally. Kays often made loud comments about humans needing to read instructions for everything while superior species could learn by instinct. The instructors noticed her dedication, but most seemed to think it was pointless effort. Commander Voss told her privately that humans might be better suited for support roles rather than frontline combat positions. He suggested she consider transferring to communications or logistics where her attention to detail might be more useful. But Ji Woo had not come this far to settle for a support role. She was the first human to be accepted into the Advanced Combat Program, and she knew that her performance would determine whether other humans would get the same opportunity. The weight of representing her entire species pressed down on her every day, but it also drove her to work harder than anyone else. She began arriving at the training ground before dawn, and staying after the other cadets had left. She practiced with weapons until her arms ached and ran obstacle courses until her legs could barely carry her. She studied video recordings of previous academy competitions, analyzing the techniques of legendary warriors from across the galaxy. What her classmates did not see was how she adapted everything she learned. Human flexibility became an advantage when she learned to move in ways that confused opponents who expected standard attack patterns. Her smaller size let her use the environment in creative ways, finding cover and concealment that larger beings could not access. She discovered that human endurance was actually superior to many alien species. While Altarians could burst into incredible speed and power, they tired quickly in extended combat. Nexus warriors needed to conserve battery power for their mechanical systems. The Granite people were strong but moved slowly to preserve energy. Ji Woo realized that humans had evolved as persistence hunters who could outlast faster and stronger prey. She began to see her seemingly inferior physical abilities as different rather than lesser. Her 2 arms might not be as strong as 4 mechanical limbs, but they were more precise for delicate work. Her soft flesh might not stop energy blasts, but it healed faster than crystalline armor. When damaged, as the months passed, the mockery continued, but Ji Woo stopped letting it affect her performance. She understood now that being underestimated was actually an advantage. Other cadets assumed they knew her capabilities and did not prepare for tactics they had never seen before. The final combat simulation was approaching, and betting pools had already started forming around which cadet would emerge victorious. Ji Woo was not even mentioned in most discussions. The odds makers did not bother calculating chances for the human girl who barely managed to pass the minimum requirements. But late at night, in the quiet of her dormitory room, Ji Woo smiled as she reviewed her plans. She had spent every free moment preparing for this moment, studying not just her opponents, but the simulation system itself. She knew things about the academy and its technology that none of her classmates had bothered to learn. They saw weakness, where she had learned to see opportunity. They focused on their strengths while she had studied their weaknesses. The final test would soon reveal what human determination could accomplish when everyone expected failure. The other cadets would learn that sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one no one takes seriously. The announcement came during the morning assembly when Commander Voss stepped onto the platform overlooking 300 cadets from across the galaxy. His scarred face showed no emotion as he activated the holographic display behind him. Image showed a massive arena filled with twisted metal structures, broken buildings, and scattered weapons. "This is the Crucible," he said, his voice echoing through the silent hall. "The final test that will determine who among you deserves to graduate as an elite galactic warrior. The rules are simple. All 300 of you will enter the simulation at the same time. Only one will emerge victorious. A murmur ran through the assembled cadets. Some looked excited while others appeared nervous. Jai Wu felt her heart rate increase, but kept her expression calm. She had been preparing for this moment for months, studying everything she could find about previous Crucible competitions. The simulation is designed to be unwinnable. Commander Voss continued, "The arena will throw everything at you. Automated defense systems, enemy combatants, environmental hazards, and most dangerous of all each other. The last cadet standing after all others have been eliminated will be declared the winner." Gestured to the holographic display, which began showing footage from previous years. Ji Woo watched as powerful warriors battled through the virtual environment. Some fell to the automated turrets that emerged from hidden panels. Others were eliminated by fellow cadets in brutal one-on-one combat. The longest any cadet had ever lasted was 7 hours of continuous fighting. The current record holder is Zex Corvin, a Nexus warrior who graduated 5 years ago. Commander Voss said his victory required him to defeat 47 opponents in direct combat while avoiding countless automated threats. Most winners typically face between 20 and 30 opponents before claiming victory. Ji Woo did quick mental calculations. If 300 cadets entered, and the winner usually faced 30 opponents, that meant most eliminations happened through environmental hazards and automated systems rather than direct cadet versus cadet combat. This was important information that she filed away for. "Later you have 1 week to prepare," Commander Voss announced. "Use this time wisely. Study the arena layout, plan your strategies, and prepare for the most challenging test of your military careers. The simulation pods will be calibrated to each species requirements, so there will be no excuses for failure." As the assembly dispersed, Ji Woo noticed the excitement in the air. Cadets were already forming groups to discuss tactics and share preparation ideas. The Altarian princes gathered around. Kaze, who was demonstrating advanced energy projection techniques. The Nexus warriors compared their weapon configurations and discussed optimal arm coordination patterns, but no one approached Ji Woo. She walked alone to the academy library while other cadets headed to the training grounds or simulation chambers. The betting pools had already started, and she could hear fragments of conversation as she passed through the common areas. 10,000 to 1 against the human one, Cadet laughed. She will be eliminated in the first 5 minutes. Another group was discussing whether Ji Woo would even attempt to fight or simply hide until the simulation systems found and eliminated her in the library. Ji Woo accessed every file she could find about the Crucible simulation. The Academy kept detailed records of previous competitions, including full video recordings of winning performances. She spent the entire day analyzing tactical patterns, environmental hazards, and elimination sequences. The arena layout changed each year, but certain elements remained consistent. There were always elevated positions that provided tactical advantages. Hidden weapon caches were scattered throughout the environment. Environmental hazards included automated turrets, energy barriers, and unstable structures that could collapse without warning. Most interesting to Ji Woo were the elimination patterns. She noticed that the majority of cadets were removed from the simulation within the first 2 hours. Usually, they fell victim to automated systems or made tactical mistakes while engaging in early combat. The survivors tended to be either extremely powerful fighters who could overwhelm opposition or clever tacticians who avoided unnecessary fights. She also studied the psychological patterns of previous winners. They typically fell into 2 categories. The first were dominant fighters like Zex Corvin, who used superior firepower and natural abilities to crush all opposition. The second were patient strategists who let others exhaust themselves before striking at optimal moments. Ji Woo realized she could never compete in the first category. Her human physiology simply could not match the raw power of Altarian energy projection or Nexus mechanical enhancement. But the second category offered possibilities. Her months of study had taught her that patience and preparation could sometimes overcome natural advantages. She spent the next 3 days mapping every detail of the simulation environment. The Academy training computers allowed cadets to explore non-combat versions of the arena. Ji-woo walked through every corridor, examined every potential hiding spot, and identified locations where weapons and equipment were typically cached. While other cadets focused on combat training, Ji-woo studied the technical specifications of every system in the simulation. She learned how the automated turrets acquired targets, how the energy barriers operated, and most importantly, how all these systems were powered and controlled. On the 4th day, she made a discovery that changed everything. While researching the simulation infrastructure, she found technical manuals that described the electromagnetic shielding used to protect sensitive equipment from interference. She realized that the advanced weapons and cybernetic systems used by other species were all vulnerable to electromagnetic pulse attacks. The manuals also revealed that EMP devices could be constructed from common simulation components. The arena contained enough spare parts and energy sources to build a primitive but effective pulse generator if someone knew what to look for. Most species had evolved beyond such crude technology and would never consider using it. Ji-woo spent the remaining preparation time memorizing the locations of components she would need. She practiced assembling devices quickly under time pressure and studied the optimal positioning for maximum effect. An EMP attack would be most effective when deployed from a central location against multiple targets in close proximity. Meanwhile, the other cadets continued their conventional preparations. Kays led intensive training sessions for the Altarian cadets, teaching them advanced formation tactics. Tech and Zin worked with other Nexus warriors to coordinate multi-arm combat techniques. The Granite people practiced their siege-breaking abilities. None of them considered that their greatest advantages might become liabilities against an opponent. Who understood their weaknesses, Ji-woo watched their preparations with interest, noting how they focused exclusively on maximizing their natural strengths rather than protecting against unexpected threats. The night before the simulation, Ji-woo lay in her dormitory bed, listening to the excited conversations of her fellow cadets through the thin walls. They were discussing victory celebrations and speculating about their post-graduation assignments. Several mentioned the honor of defeating the legendary Crucible Challenge, but Ji-woo was not thinking about victory celebrations. She was visualizing every step of her plan from the moment the simulation began to the final confrontation she hoped to engineer. Her strategy depended on precise timing, careful positioning, and above all, the willingness to use tactics that others would consider beneath their dignity. The other cadets saw the Crucible as a test of strength and power. Ji-woo understood it was really a test of adaptability and intelligence. The strongest cadet would not necessarily win. The smartest one would. The one who best understood that sometimes the most primitive solution was also the most effective, as she finally drifted off to sleep. Ji-woo smiled at the irony. Tomorrow the galaxy would learn that being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. The simulation chamber hummed with energy as 300 cadets took their positions in the pod bay. Ji-woo climbed into her assigned pod, feeling the neural interface helmet settle over her head. The gel padding adjusted automatically to her human skull shape, while similar pods around her accommodated the various alien physiologies. Through the transparent pod cover, she could see other cadets making final preparations. Kays flexed his crystalline armor plates while his energy reserves charged to full capacity. Tech and Zin synchronized their mechanical systems, ensuring all 4 arms would respond perfectly to their mental commands. The massive Granite warriors tested their stone-like skin for any weak points. 3 minutes to simulation. Start, came the automated announcement. Ji-woo closed her eyes and ran through her plan one final time. She had memorized the arena layout, identified the locations of the components she needed, and calculated the optimal timing for each phase of her strategy. The neural interface activated. and suddenly she was standing in the virtual arena. The environment materialized around her with startling realism. Broken buildings stretched in all directions, connected by twisted walkways and scattered debris. The artificial suns cast harsh shadows, creating perfect hiding spots and sniper positions. 2 minutes to combat initiation. All cadets prepare for insertion. Ji-woo looked around at her fellow contestants who were spread across the arena in random starting positions. Some were already moving toward elevated positions to gain tactical advantages. Others were checking their assigned starting equipment and planning their initial moves. She noticed that most cadets were focusing on the other participants, already identifying potential threats and planning their first attacks. But Ji-woo had different priorities. She quickly scanned her immediate surroundings and identified the nearest cache of spare components, according to her. Memorized maps. Combat simulation begins now. Fight well, cadets. The arena exploded into chaos immediately. Kaze roared a battle cry and launched himself into the air, using energy projection to boost his jump. His first blast struck a group of 3 Nexus warriors who had been coordinating their approach. One fell instantly, while the other 2 scattered for cover. All around the arena, similar scenes played out as 300 elite fighters unleashed their most devastating abilities. The Altarian twins began a coordinated assault that had them moving in perfect synchronization while projecting overlapping energy shields. Their combined firepower carved through a section of building wall like it was made of paper. The Nexus warriors responded by spreading out and using their forearm advantage to wield multiple weapons simultaneously. Tech spun like a whirlwind with energy rifles in all 4 hands, creating a wall of destruction that forced nearby opponents to seek cover. The mechanical precision of their targeting systems made every shot count. Meanwhile, the Granite people used their incredible strength to hurl chunks of debris as improvised projectiles. Their stone-like skin deflected most energy weapons, allowing them to advance steadily through areas other species could not survive. The sound of their heavy footsteps echoed across the battlefield like rolling thunder, but Ji-woo did something completely different. She ran, not toward the combat but away from it, sprinting through the maze of broken buildings toward the location where her research had indicated spare components would be stored. Her small size allowed her to move quickly through gaps that larger beings could not navigate. Behind her, the elimination. Notifications began. Cadet Moore, eliminated. Cadet Zeth, eliminated. Cadet Voss, eliminated. The first casualties fell within 30 seconds. As the most aggressive fighters collided with devastating results, Ji-woo reached the first component cache and quickly stuffed several items into her equipment pouches. Circuit boards, power cells, and connector cables that other cadets would ignore as worthless junk. But she knew exactly how these simple components could be combined to create something that could change the entire battle. She could hear the sounds of combat growing more intense as she moved to the second cache location. Energy weapons discharged with sounds like thunder, while mechanical systems whirred and clicked as Nexus warriors coordinated complex attack patterns. The ground shook periodically as Granite people threw massive objects or collided with structures. Cadet. Jin eliminated. Cadet. Pak eliminated. The elimination rate was increasing as the initial chaos sorted itself into more organized conflicts. The automated defense systems had also activated, adding turret fire and energy barriers to the environmental hazards. 20 minutes into the simulation, nearly 50 cadets had been eliminated. Ji-woo had successfully reached 3 component caches and was carrying everything she needed to build her device. But now came the dangerous part. She needed to get closer to the main combat zone to identify the optimal deployment location. She climbed to an elevated walkway that provided a clear view of the central arena. The scene below was like something from a war zone. Energy blasts lit up the air, while mechanical warriors spun through complex combat maneuvers. The survivors were grouping into loose alliances as they realized that individual action was becoming increasingly dangerous. Casey had emerged as one of the dominant forces in the battle. His energy projection abilities allowed him to engage multiple opponents simultaneously, while his crystalline armor deflected most return fire. A circle of eliminated opponents surrounded his position, testifying to his devastating effectiveness. The Nexus twins had found each other and were fighting back-to-back their 8 arms, creating an almost impenetrable web of weapons fire. They moved through the battlefield, like a single organism, each anticipating the others. Actions perfectly. Their mechanical efficiency was terrifying to watch, but Ji-Woo noticed something that the spectators and even the combatants probably missed. The most powerful fighters were expending enormous amounts of energy in their spectacular displays. K's energy reserves had to be dropping with each massive blast he projected. The Nexus warriors were running their systems at maximum output, which would drain their power cells quickly. She also observed the tactical patterns that were developing. The survivors were naturally gravitating toward the center of the arena, where the heaviest fighting was taking place. This concentration was exactly what her plan required, but she needed to wait for the right moment. When exhaustion began to slow the combatants, Cadet Rex eliminated Cadet Dawn, eliminated 1 hour into the simulation, and the elimination rate was beginning to slow. The remaining 150 cadets were mostly the strongest and smartest fighters who had survived the initial chaos through skill rather than luck. But Ji-Woo could see signs that even these elite warriors were beginning to feel the strain of continuous combat. Energy blasts were slightly less intense than they had been at the start. Mechanical movements were becoming less precise as systems heated up from overuse. Even the mighty granite people were moving more slowly as they conserved their strength for crucial moments. This was the pattern Ji-Woo had expected from studying previous Crucible recordings. The first hour eliminated the weak and the unlucky. The second hour would test endurance and tactical thinking. The third hour would belong to whoever had prepared most carefully. She began moving toward the central combat zone, using routes that avoided the main battle lines. Her human flexibility allowed her to squeeze through damaged structures and climb through openings that her larger opponents could not use. The components in her pouches felt heavier now, but she was almost ready to begin the final phase. Cadet Storm eliminated Cadet Blade eliminated as the second hour began. Ji-Woo smiled. Her fellow cadets were fighting exactly as she had predicted. They were so focused on demonstrating their superior abilities that they had not noticed the small human figure moving carefully through the shadows, collecting components and positioning herself for the moment that would change everything. The chaos was far from over, but Ji-Woo was no longer running from it. She was about to become its master. 2 hours into the simulation, the battlefield had transformed from chaotic free for all to calculated warfare. 120 cadets remained, and they had begun to understand that random aggression would only lead to elimination. The smartest fighters were choosing their battles carefully, while the strongest were conserving energy for crucial moments. Ji-Woo crouched behind a collapsed wall section, watching the combat patterns develop below her. She had spent the last 30 minutes assembling her electromagnetic pulse device, using components scavenged from 3 different cache locations. The primitive-looking collection of circuits and power cells would have made her instructors laugh, but she knew its true potential. The device was nearly complete. She just needed one more component, a focusing array that would concentrate the pulse into a directional beam rather than an omnidirectional burst. Her research had indicated that such arrays were stored in the central equipment depot, but reaching it meant crossing through the heaviest combat zone. She watched Kaze demonstrate why he was considered the favorite to win. The Altarian prince had just eliminated 2 opponents simultaneously using a sustained energy beam that cut through their cover like paper. His crystalline armor glowed with absorbed power as he prepared for his next attack. But Ji-Woo noticed something others missed. His movements were slightly slower than they had been an hour earlier. The Nexus twins. Tech and Zin had claimed a fortified position and were using their superior firepower to control a key choke point. Their four arms moved in perfect coordination, creating overlapping fields of fire that made their position nearly unassailable. But their mechanical systems were generating visible heat signatures indicating they were operating at maximum capacity. It was time to make her first move. Jiwoo had identified her target, Cadet Bok, a granite warrior who was fighting alone, after his allies had been eliminated. He was incredibly tough and strong, but he had one critical weakness. He relied entirely on his natural stone skin for protection and carried no energy shields or advanced armor systems. She moved carefully through, the rubble staying low and using every piece of cover available. Her human flexibility allowed her to squeeze through gaps that would have trapped larger opponents. The route she had planned avoided the main sight lines while bringing her into position behind the granite warrior. Bok was engaged in combat with an Altarian cadet, trading crushing blows for energy blasts. Neither was winning quickly, but both were focused entirely on their immediate opponent. They had no attention left to watch for threats from other directions. Jiwoo struck with the element of complete surprise. She had salvaged a kinetic rifle from an eliminated opponent and loaded it with armor-piercing rounds, while Bok's stone skin could deflect energy weapons. The ancient technology of physical projectiles was something his species had not encountered in centuries. The first shot struck him in the back of the knee where his stone armor was thinnest. The impact shattered his leg armor and sent him stumbling forward directly into the path of his Altarian opponent, Energy Blast. The combined assault eliminated him instantly, Cadet Bok eliminated. The Altarian who had been fighting Bok looked around in confusion, trying to identify where the kinetic shot had come from, but Jiwoo was already gone, melting back into the maze of debris before anyone could spot her position. The spectators in the Academy viewing chambers began to murmur with interest. The human girl had scored her first elimination, and she had done it using a combination of patience, positioning, and primitive weapons that the advanced species had forgotten were still effective. But Jiwoo was not finished. Her second target was already identified, Cadet Yun, a solo Nexus warrior, who was attempting to flank the twins' position. His four mechanical arms were impressive, but they also made him top-heavy and his movements predictable to someone who had studied Nexus combat patterns for months. She set up a simple trap using debris and a triggered explosive charge salvaged from the battlefield. When Yun moved through the narrow passage, she had predicted he would use the explosion, brought down enough rubble to pin his lower body while damaging his mechanical systems, unable to move, and with two of his arms crushed, Yun became an easy target for other combatants who quickly moved in to eliminate him. Jiwoo watched from concealment as her trap worked exactly as planned. She had eliminated another opponent without direct confrontation, and without exposing herself to return fire, Cadet Yun eliminated. Now, the other cadets began to realize something was happening. The random eliminations and unlucky breaks they had assumed were part of the simulation were actually the work of a hidden opponent. Someone was hunting them using methods they had not anticipated. KZ rallied the remaining fighters with a telepathic broadcast that reached across the arena. "We have a problem," he announced, his mental voice carrying to every surviving cadet. "Someone is picking us off using primitive tactics. We need to identify and eliminate this threat before continuing our individual battles." Jiwoo smiled as she listened to the growing concern in their mental communications. They were finally beginning to understand that the greatest threat was not the opponent with the biggest energy blast or the most mechanical arms. It was the one they had completely ignored. She made her next move even bolder, moving through the central equipment depot. While combat raged around her, she retrieved the focusing array she needed and began the final assembly of her electromagnetic pulse device. The irony was not lost on her that she was building a weapon to defeat advanced technology using components scattered throughout their own training facility. Her third elimination came when she used the depot security system against Cadet Len. another Altarian who was attempting to resupply his energy reserves by triggering a containment field. At the right moment, she trapped him in an energy feedback loop that overloaded his crystalline armor. The automated system eliminated him as a safety precaution. Cadet Lin eliminated. The remaining 90 cadets were now actively hunting for the hidden opponent. Patrols began sweeping through areas that had been ignored during the main combat. Alliance formations started, including rear guards to watch for surprise attacks. The entire dynamic of the simulation had changed, but Jiwo had what she needed. Her electromagnetic pulse device was complete, and she had identified the perfect deployment location. A central platform that would give her line of sight to the largest concentration of opponents while providing multiple escape routes. She also had intelligence that none of the others possessed. During her scavenging runs, she had accessed several monitoring stations and learned the current status of every remaining cadet, energy reserves, battery levels, armor, integrity, and weapon ammunition were all displayed on screens that most combatants were too busy fighting to check. Casey was down to 60% energy reserves but still fighting at full intensity. The Nexus twins were running hot with multiple system warnings flashing on their status displays. Several granite warriors were showing stress fractures in their stone armor from sustained combat. Most importantly, Ji Woo had identified the exact moment when her attack would be most effective. The surviving cadets were being forced together by the arena automated systems, which were gradually reducing the available combat area. Walls were rising and passages were sealing, forcing concentration of the remaining fighters. In exactly 12 minutes, the arena would complete its contraction phase, and the strongest remaining cadets would be trapped together in the central combat zone. That would be when Ji Woo revealed what human ingenuity could accomplish against opponents who had forgotten that. Sometimes the oldest solutions were also the best. She began her final approach carrying the completed EMP device and several backup kinetic weapons. The hunt was about to become a battle, and the galaxy was about to learn that underestimating humans was a very dangerous mistake. The other cadets thought they were hunting one frightened human girl. They were about to discover they had become the prey. The arena walls continued their slow advance, forcing the remaining 21 cadets into an increasingly smaller combat zone. Ji Woo watched from her concealed position as the strongest fighters in the galaxy were herded together by the simulation systems. The irony was perfect. They were so focused on hunting her that they had not noticed how the environment was manipulating them. Casey stood at the center of the group, his crystalline armor still gleaming despite 3 hours of continuous combat. His energy reserves were lower than he preferred, but his natural Altarian pride would not let him show weakness. The other survivors formed a loose circle around him, creating the exact formation Ji Woo had been hoping to see. The Nexus twins. Tech and Zin flanked his position, their 8 arms creating overlapping fields of fire that covered multiple approach routes. Their mechanical systems were running hot, with several warning indicators flashing, but their programming would not allow them to shut down until their mission was complete. 3 granite warriors formed the outer perimeter, their massive stone bodies serving as living shields for the more vulnerable energy-based fighters. Behind them, 2 Altarian energy specialists maintained charging stations ready to provide power support to their prince when needed. Scattered throughout the formation were the remaining survivors, insectoid hive minds with their rapid communication abilities, crystalline beings whose bodies could refract energy attacks, energy wraiths who could phase through solid matter. Each represented the absolute elite of their species, the strongest, fastest, and smartest individuals their worlds had produced, and they were all hunting one human. "Girl, you cannot hide forever," came Kay's mental broadcast, his telepathic voice reaching every corner of the arena. "Show yourself and face elimination with honor." The mockery in his tone carried clearly, even through the alien telepathic medium. Ji Woo almost laughed. The Altarian prince still thought this was about honor and facing opponents in direct combat. He had no understanding that she had already won the moment they allowed themselves to be gathered together in one location. She activated her communicator using the standard Academy frequency. "All cadets can hear this," she said, her human voice cutting through their alien chatter. "You want to see what human tactics look like? Here is your lesson." She stood up from her concealment, revealing herself to the 20 warriors who had been hunting her for the past hour. Her small human form looked pathetic compared to their alien might. The contrast was so extreme that several of the cadets actually laughed. "There she is," called out Tech His, mechanical voice carrying clearly across the combat zone, "the little human girl who thinks she can defeat real warriors with primitive tricks. Your hiding games end now." The 19 opponents began to close in on her position, moving with the confidence of predators who had finally cornered their prey. Energy weapons powered up to full charge, mechanical systems engaged combat protocols. Stone armor plates shifted to provide maximum protection, each alien warrior prepared to demonstrate the natural superiority of their species. Ji-Woo stood calmly in the center of what would soon become a killing field. She held a simple device in her hands, something that looked like a collection of scavenged parts held together with basic connectors. None of them recognized the technology because their species had moved beyond such primitive solutions centuries ago. "This is pathetic," Kays announced as he raised his primary energy projector. "The human girl brings spare parts to a battle between warriors. Your species has no place among the galactic elite." The 19 fighters formed a perfect circle around her. Each had line of sight to her position, with no cover or concealment available. Their combined firepower could have destroyed a small building. The energy readings from their weapons would have made even veteran soldiers retreat in fear, but Ji-Woo was not afraid. She had spent months preparing for exactly this moment, studying exactly these opponents, and planning exactly this scenario. They were doing precisely what she had predicted they would do, responding exactly as their species' instincts and training had programmed them to respond. "You fought well for a human." Kays continued, his voice carrying the arrogance that had made him the target of her strategy from the very beginning. "But this ends now. Your primitive tactics cannot overcome natural superiority." That was when Ji-Woo activated her device. The electromagnetic pulse erupted outward in a perfect sphere, expanding at the speed of light to encompass every advanced system within 50 meters. The energy wave was invisible to organic eyes, but its effects were immediately obvious. Kays' energy projector died in his hands, the focusing crystals going dark as their power systems failed his armor. Powered systems shut down, leaving him in basic crystalline plates with no enhanced capabilities. The look of shock on his blue face was worth months of mockery. Tech and Zin, mechanical arms seized up as their control systems, crashed. 2 of their 4 limbs went completely dead, while the other 2 moved erratically as backup systems tried to compensate. Their targeting computers flickered and died, leaving them with manual aiming only. The energy specialists, Altarian, support systems shut down completely, leaving them with emergency power only. The crystalline beings lost their ability to refract energy attacks as their internal matrices destabilized. The energy wraiths found themselves locked into solid form as their phase-shifting abilities failed. In 30 seconds, the most technologically advanced young warriors in the galaxy had been reduced to confused aliens holding dead equipment. None of their natural advantages had been affected, but all of their technological enhancements were gone. The arena fell silent, except for the hum of systems slowly rebooting and the sound of Ji-Woo checking her kinetic rifle. The weapon had been deliberately chosen because it relied on simple mechanical action, rather than advanced electronics. The EMP that had disabled every other weapon in the area had no effect on its basic firing mechanism. "Now we fight on equal terms," she said quietly as she raised the primitive projectile weapon that her instructors had dismissed as obsolete. "Who wants to go first?" The shock on their faces was complete. They had built their entire identities around technological superiority and natural advantages that had just been stripped away. Kays tried to activate his energy, projection again, but nothing happened. His body could still generate the power, but the focusing systems were completely dead. Ji-Woo began eliminating them methodically, starting with the most dangerous opponents while they were still paralyzed by disbelief. Tech fell first as she put 3 kinetic rounds center mass. His mechanical armor was tough, but not designed to stop physical projectiles. Zin tried to charge her with his dead mechanical arms, but human reflexes were fast enough to track. His awkward movement. The granite warriors were next. Their stone skin was naturally tough, but kinetic weapons had been used against their species for millennia. They knew how to fight energy blasts, but had no defense against old-fashioned bullets. One by one, the greatest young warriors in the galaxy fell to technology their ancestors might have used. The advanced beings who had mocked human primitiveness discovered that sometimes the oldest solutions were also the most effective, as Kays fell. To her final shot, Ji-Woo stood alone among 20 eliminated opponents. The simulation ended with a single human cadet victorious over the combined might of galactic civilization. In the viewing chambers, 3,000 spectators sat in stunned silence. They had just watched their assumptions about technological superiority and natural advantages completely destroyed by one small human who understood that being underestimated was the greatest weapon of all. The 30 seconds it took for her electromagnetic pulse to change the battle would be studied by military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. It was the moment humanity announced itself as a species that would never again be dismissed as primitive or weak. The simulation chamber went completely silent as the virtual battlefield faded away around Park Ji-Woo. She stood alone in the empty pod as the neural interface disengaged, feeling the artificial gravity of the station return to normal. Through the transparent cover, she could see hundreds of cadets in the surrounding pods, all staring at her with expressions of shock and disbelief. The elimination counter on the main display showed the final tally: 299 eliminations. 1 survivor. The impossible had become reality. A human cadet had defeated every other fighter in the most challenging test the Galactic Military Academy could devise. Commander Voss' voice echoed through the pod bay. His words careful and measured. Simulation complete. Winner Park Ji-Woo, Human Military Academy, Earth. The first human to achieve victory in the Crucible Challenge. The pod covers began opening automatically as cadets climbed out to face the aftermath of their defeat. Kays was the first to approach Ji-Woo, his blue face showing emotions that Altarian pride rarely allowed him to display. "You," he said simply. "How did you accomplish this?" Ji-Woo climbed out of her pod and faced the Altarian prince who had led the mockery against her. "For months I studied," she replied quietly. "I learned your strengths, and I found your weaknesses. While you focused on showing your power, I focused on understanding how to defeat it." But the primitive technology. Tech interrupted his mechanical voice, carrying confusion that his programming could not process, the electromagnetic pulse device. "How did you know such an ancient weapon would be effective because you forgot it existed?" Ji-Woo answered, "Your species advanced beyond simple solutions. So long ago that you stopped preparing for them. You designed all your defenses around energy weapons and cyber attacks, but you never considered that someone might use technology from 1,000 years ago." The gathered cadets listened in silence as she explained the strategy that had seemed like cowardice but was actually the most sophisticated tactical thinking any of them had ever witnessed. She had not been running scared during the early phases of the simulation. She had been positioning herself and gathering intelligence while letting them exhaust their resources. The spectators in the viewing chambers were beginning to react as the implications of what they had witnessed became clear. Military officers from dozens of species were already requesting copies of the simulation data. Defense contractors were placing emergency calls to their research divisions. The entire foundation of galactic military doctrine was being questioned. Word of Ji Woo victory spread through the academy, communication systems within minutes. By the time she reached the debriefing chambers, news feeds across known space were carrying the story. A human cadet had accomplished what no one believed was possible, using tactics that challenged every assumption about modern warfare. The debriefing session lasted for hours as military analysts tried to understand exactly what had happened. Combat specialists from multiple species questioned Ji Woo about every aspect of her strategy. They wanted to know how she had identified the EMP vulnerability, how she had predicted the movement patterns of different species, and most importantly, how she had maintained the psychological discipline to execute such a complex plan. "I never tried to be stronger than you," she explained to the panel of senior officers. "I knew I could not match your natural advantages. So instead, I learned to be smarter. I studied until I understood your species better than you understood yourselves." The questions continued, but Ji Woo could see in their faces that they already understood the larger implications. Her victory was not just about one simulation. It was proof that humans brought something unique to galactic civilization, the ability to adapt to any challenge by thinking beyond conventional solutions. 3 days later, the formal graduation ceremony took place in the Academy main hall. Ji Woo stood with the other surviving cadets as their names were called and their assignments announced. But when her turn came, Commander Voss paused before speaking. "Cadet Park Ji Woo," he announced, his voice carrying across the silent hall. "Your performance in the Crucible simulation has been reviewed by the Galactic Defense Council. Your tactical innovations and strategic thinking have been deemed worthy of special recognition." Ji Woo felt her heart race as she wondered what this meant. Special recognition could be anything from a commendation to reassignment to a research division. She had hoped to earn a combat posting, but she understood that her unusual methods might be seen as better suited for planning than fighting. "The Defense Council has created a new position," he continued, "Advanced Tactical Development Specialist. Your assignment is to work directly with fleet commanders to develop new strategies that incorporate human tactical thinking into standard galactic military doctrine." The hall erupted in applause as the implications became clear. Ji Woo was not being assigned to a support role or hidden away in a research facility. She was being placed at the center of galactic military planning, where her innovative thinking could influence how entire fleets operated, but the impact went far beyond her personal assignment. Over the following months, applications from human cadets to galactic military academies increased by 3,000%. Defense contractors began hiring human consultants to review their weapons and tactical systems. Military colleges added courses on adaptive thinking and unconventional warfare. The electromagnetic pulse attack that had lasted 30 seconds became known as the Ji Woo maneuver and was studied by tacticians across the galaxy. Equipment manufacturers began developing EMP shielding as a standard feature. New training protocols were implemented to prepare officers for opponents who might use unexpected technologies. 5 years later, Admiral Park Ji Woo commanded a mixed-species battle group defending the outer colonies from raiders. Her ships incorporated human tactical innovations that had revolutionized space combat. Her crews included beings from across the galaxy who had learned to combine their natural advantages with human strategic thinking. The mockery she had endured as a cadet had become respect earned through proven capability. Other species no longer saw humans as weak primitives, but as dangerous allies whose ability to find creative solutions made them invaluable in any conflict the galaxy had learned. That technological superiority meant nothing against opponents who refused to fight by conventional rules. But perhaps most importantly, Ji-Woo victory had opened doors for other humans who dreamed of serving among the stars. Her name appeared in the Academy Hall of Heroes alongside legendary warriors from across known space. The human cadet, who had been given odds of 10,000 to 1, had become the standard by which tactical brilliance was measured, military historians would later mark. Her 30-second EMP attack as the moment humanity truly joined the galactic community. Not as junior partners seeking acceptance, but as equals who brought unique capabilities to the collective defense of civilized space. Her name was written in the stars as the human who proved that being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. The girl who had been mocked for her species' limitations had shown the galaxy that sometimes the most primitive solutions were also the most sophisticated. And in 30 seconds of electromagnetic chaos, she had changed the course of galactic military history forever.